You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks again for coming to Healing Voices Project. We're glad you're listening. And today we're going to talk about the DART program, which is also known as the Drug Addiction Recovery Team, but also better known as DART. DART was developed by the Northampton Department of Health and Human Services in 2017 and piloted in Northampton, East Hampton, Belchertown, and Ware back in 2017. But it started to spread quickly with the success they've had. And as a public health entity, DART saw the need to address substance abuse disorder as a public health crisis, and I think we can all agree on that. They currently serve communities throughout Western Mass in Hampden County, Hampshire County, and Berkshire counties, and they've partnered with police departments throughout Western Massachusetts. So here to talk about DART is the DART coordinator, Kathi Cotugno. Kathi, thanks for coming.
Good morning.
Sure, nice to have you.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, we have a lot to talk about because DART does so much. I've been reading about it, learning about it, and as the, again, drug addiction recovery team, there is so much to cover that DART does. And you've been with DART now for, well, almost a year now, right?
Almost a year.
And as the DART coordinator, to ask you what you do is probably asking a lot, but can you tell me what you do and a little bit about what DART does to start off?
So DART is an opiate post-overdose outreach program, and we are a public health-based program, in meaning that we provide services to people who have overdosed or are at risk to overdose, to provide them services in the community. And that could be as simple as recovery coaching or finding them resources in the community to address their needs. And the way we develop the program is that it actually happens through, we use our community police departments, because we feel that they have a good sense of their community and people that are at need. And also we wanted to change the dynamic that in the past drug issues were always handled in a law force capacity.
Okay.
And that is not what we need anymore in this crisis and in this epidemic. We need to help individuals and meet them where they're at. So DART provides harm reduction, which could be as simple as a clean needle exchange, or hooking them up with Tapestry Health, meeting them where they're at. So any person we will accept into the program. So you don't have to be necessarily post-overdose, but those are the people that we most likely see in our services. And then they get referred to a recovery coach who follows up with them. And that recovery coach helps them plan a pathway for recovery.
Well, and not to interrupt, because I want to have a question. You said you'll meet with anyone.
Correct.
Anyone. That says a lot. So what is there any, anybody, but you become a connector, right?
Correct.
Right. So you're also referring people and finding the right program, the right fit.
Correct.
For each of those people. So there's no one you will turn down.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Right. And our funding actually allows us to do that. We are mainly a post-opiate overdose outreach program. But again, we know that currently, post-pandemic of COVID, we are actually seeing a very high level of alcohol use. it has really increased in our communities, and we have EMS and police reaching out and showing us that data that they provide to us, that their community members really are, alcoholism has really increased. So if somebody gets referred to us and it's about alcohol, we will still see them. We will find them resources about alcoholism. We will find them programming. We'll find them AA meetings. We'll provide them all of those services additionally. But we do know also that most substance use disease is a polysubstance. So
Yes.
so typically somebody who is using fentanyl most likely is also drinking. So you're already going to deal with that dual
Right.
substance use in our program.
And we should mention too, you have when people want to learn about DART or get in touch with DART, there's a website and a phone number. Do you want to mention the website?
So
Yeah.
website is DARTMA, DARTMA.org.
Okay.
And on that site, you can refer a loved one, an individual. It is anonymous, so that that person doesn't know who is referring them, which is sometimes very helpful for a family member. And then you can also call in to you
got to remember the phone number.
because I don't ever call it, how we are, is 413-588-2335, and that is actually a text or call referral number.
Okay.
And that is also listed on our website. So you have three options. You can call and put in a referral, you could text and put in a referral, or you could put the referral in on our website.
I was on the website and I saw that there's all kinds of ways to do that, and it sort of steers you into the right way, because I thought there's a pretty thorough website you got.
Thank you.
There's a lot of information there.
We're still, it's brand new,
Yeah.
and we're still building it, but it's showing some great success rate.
Yep. And I know also too, and you've been with DART again. This June will be a year, right? And I know you've also lived an experience, so you have some firsthand experience with that.
I do.
Yourself.
I am a parent who lost a child in 2016 to a fentanyl heroin overdose. That is what has brought me to where I am today, and so I have that lived experience from a family and parent point of view, which I find a great benefit in my position with
Certainly you can
working
empathize
in
and understand.
working in the communities and actually working with the police departments and doing our training. I can give some really good feedback and direction and talk about stigma and how important harm reduction really is. So that's my
Your
story.
experience and what led you, and I'm sorry, to hear about your son, Adam, and that was in 2016.
Correct.
Prior to that, and I'm saying this to relate to other people like myself too, you learned a lot in the last 5 years or so, and you now know, wow, the things you didn't know back then, I would imagine.
Right.
And only wished you had known.
Right,
Yeah.
or was in practice.
Yeah.
In Adam's death in 2016, that was really kind of the peak
Yeah.
of this epidemic, and that we were seeing the need for change in how we address policies, what we offer individuals for services. So that, again, DART being developed based on that, it was about meeting people where they're at, offering them multiple pathways that they can try to reach recovery. So that whole change in the last 6 years across Massachusetts has been really dramatic. And I like seeing it.
Yeah.
I think that we're really starting to be community-based, accepting individuals where they're at, and really working on understanding that substance use is a disorder, and that there are many ways that we can help an individual, that, it's not necessarily incarceration, is not necessarily long-term inpatient treatment. There are many different routes that we can go.
And obviously, the earlier the better, of course. And so now you said something a few times I want to talk about, which I think is very important, is the stigma, and how the stigma affects, one, the families and their willingness to talk about it, and a willingness for somebody to seek treatment, and all that the stigma affects, and how what do you see in the change of the stigma that's affecting treatment now? Do you see it changing at all?
I do.
Too slow?
I think it's too slow.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a change, and I think that change, in particular in our program, is the change in, honestly, policing, and also community members on how they're addressing substance use. And when I bring up, the change in policing, they have embraced the idea that their job has always been to help and save people.
Yeah.
So when they started to really see this epidemic increase, they realized that, us arresting an individual over and over again, and, most likely being incarcerated, isn't the solution.
Right.
So how are we going to address a different solution? Well, one of them is the DART program. And we also have a rapid response team that we work with through the Sheriff's Department. But my point is that those officers in those police departments have decided that we need to make a change in our community. Yeah. And so it's about knowing those individuals who are at risk, or they're at a scene that unfortunately, our officers are on scenes of overdoses almost daily, or a number of times a week, which is traumatic for them. But sometimes it's a repeat person who has overdosed, and they've realized that there needs to be a change. So, our DART program offers them the opportunity to make those connections, not have to do all the work themselves, but know that these are the resources in your community. Here's a contact person. Our ability to have an individual hook up with a recovery coach, talk about those different, and that recovery coach, that individual may choose detox, but that individual may not. And so what are their other options? So they could join a recovery center. They could do multiple pathways. They could be able to access MOUD, which is a medical assisted medication for people who have a substance use disorder, which is really one of the first steps in addressing your addiction. So, our recovery coaches will help them make that connection with those agencies to do that, so that they could, either start on Suboxone or do methadone, if that's the avenue or the pathway that they choose to go.
So in the past 5 or 6 years, since DART has been in place, you've found, one, it's expanding, it's growing. Based on success, obviously, you find, how do you see the success? What do you see changing as a result of the DART program?
We're seeing less deaths, believe it or not.
Really?
I mean, they're not. It's not a great decrease, if you look at the national average, but we are seeing a decrease in deaths. We are seeing communities learning the educational piece. families willing to really talk because of the stigma piece, them having access to programs and individuals that have lived experience really help them help their family members or help that individual.
And you see less incarceration and more program involvement?
We definitely see less incarceration and more program involvement, yes.
And one of the things that I've seen and what I've recognized since I wrote the book a couple of years ago and started this podcast is, and I'll admit, many people's heads are in the sand, and I was one of them. I didn't know, and I did not know until I was just like overwhelmed with how widespread this is and how hard it is to even find a family who's not affected by this, directly or indirectly.
Right.
And every time I would have a conversation with somebody, hey, I'm writing, and they mentioned about their son or their brother, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is so. I don't know anybody who does not have somebody who they've lost or is going through it. So, and I guess what made me think about this is people need to have this kind of information because so many people don't know what to do. And like yourself, 5 or 6 years ago, you didn't know, and you said what you've learned in the last 5 years could certainly help people. And part of that is, well, again, trying to create the awareness to release that stigma and make people more willing to come up and say, I have a problem, or what do we do, and having people willing to step up and get it early. And I'm just rambling here, but I think what I'm trying to say is this kind of information that so many people are just not aware of until after a crisis occurs.
Right.
Yeah.
In the immediate family members probably do know, but because of stigma, you're not out talking to your friends about it.
Right.
It's not out in the open, so that they've been dealing with it on their own, and that is slowly changing. And one of the great programs and is Learn to Cope for family members.
Learn to Cope is great. Yeah.
And they have a place in East Hampton, but they also have a Springfield chapters. So that's always for me, for family members, that's kind of my first resource to send them. And I also did Learn to Cope before Adam had passed away. And I think the other thing for DART that I think is key is that we do Narcan training for communities. And bottom line is the Narcan is saving lives. And so the more hands we can get Narcan into, the more lives that we are going to save. And so one of the ways that DART does that is, we supply Narcan through a grant to most of our police departments and other agencies within communities. But we also do community Narcan training.
Yeah, okay.
So, maybe, because I'm here in Agawam would like to do a community training for Narcan, and they choose to do it at the library. They could contact DART to come in and actually do that training for individuals in the community. And we are finding great success rate with getting Narcan out into the communities, and it's saving lives, and it's a key piece to this epidemic.
So, with that, if somebody wanted to find out how to use Narcan and how to get a Narcan, one, where would they get it? And two, could they just call DART directly?
They can call DART directly, but they can also so they can call DART directly. Another resource is Tapestry Health, also will provide Narcan. And technically in Massachusetts, you can go to a pharmacy and you're able to pick up Narcan through a pharmacy without a prescription. So prescription is not needed for Narcan. And so I think that that's important for people to know. And I think that people also need to know that if you administer, people always say to me, well, what if I administer and they're really not overdosing? here's the
great
great
question.
thing
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Narcan is that if you administer Narcan to somebody who is not having an opiate overdose, there are no side effects or issues that would happen to that
No unintended
individual.
consequences.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
It's safe.
it's safe. And that's why it's important for us to be, and that's also why we're out there trying to get community members to be trained in carrying Narcan.
And it's one thing to have Narcan, but knowing how and when to use it. Mm-hmm. And so you provide that kind of training.
Mm-hmm.
Are there, if somebody can't attend a training or is there a training video that they could look at? I mean,
we can work something out.
Okay.
And Tapestry is the same way. I mean, it's a pretty simple process. So between Tapestry and DART, we certainly could.
First thing is to contact DART.
Right.
And contact Tapestry, and you can at least see how critical it is for that person
Right.
to need to
Right.
know at the moment. But knowing how to use it, and like you said earlier, when to use it. When does a person know that they're going through an overdose, that now is the time to use it, and they might not be able to recognize that moment of, okay,
Right.
here's when to use it. So that training could be extremely helpful.
It is extremely
Yeah.
helpful, and it just also gives you a lot of other information for you to have. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, you also on your website, and honestly, I think if we went through everything that you do, we'd be here for hours.
Yeah.
But one of the things I know that you have is fentanyl test strip use.
We do.
Yeah. Tell us about that. 'Cause I don't know
So
much
that
about
is so fentanyl test strips are a way for somebody who is currently using a substance, in particular a fentanyl or let's be realistic. It's really not heroin anymore.
No, right.
We are really dealing with a fentanyl issue, and most product today is about 95% fentanyl. So what this strip provides is that they can at least determine that there is fentanyl in their whatever they've recently picked up.
Mm-hmm.
It won't tell them the amount, but what we teach those individuals is that, okay, if you know that there's fentanyl in it, we ask them to go slow and steady. So in other words, an individual may, whatever their normal dose that they typically inject, we ask them to lessen that amount. Believe it or not, this is harm reduction, and it's a reality. There are still many people out there that are still choosing to use.
Yeah.
So how do we protect them and keep them safe while they're using? So people kind of get a little cringy hearing this, but the reality is we're asking them to lessen their first injection.
It's a way to create some awareness that's in front of them at the moment.
Correct.
And it's not always going to work, because the lure of that high trumps the safety factor.
Correct.
Right?
It does.
That's a
but it is just something that we try to teach them in harm reduction, and we know that so what does that individual need that is choosing not to stop using? This is one of the steps so that they can test their product, and they can then make the decision. Is their decision to not use it at all? Some will make that choice. But if you're still choosing to use that product, we're asking, it's slow and steady. So you use a lesser amount than what you typically inject for your use or whatnot.
So how can someone obtain those test strips?
They can contact DART.
Okay.
We, through federal grant funding, we have lots of test strips. We also do provide them to police departments and other agencies. You can also Tapestry also has them. And you'll get, we'll give you test strips and directions on how to use the test strips. But again, what people need to understand is that that test does not tell you the amount of fentanyl that is in that product.
Only that there is fentanyl in
Right.
there. Yeah.
So that's why we ask you, if you're going to use it, to go slow, because a lesser amount may save your life.
You're counting in at least.
And
yeah.
again, also, don't use alone. We really encourage people who are still using to not use alone. It may be a family member that's more than aware of what's going on. Don't lock yourself in your bathroom. Those are all important key harm reduction pieces to remember, because that individual that is with you, and a lot of times people who are using drugs usually actually use with another or many other individuals. One of the other things we ask is that you don't both use at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
So that you can, each monitor each other.
Yeah, one will have the sense to.
Yeah, and that's the
treat
harm
other.
reduction piece.
The other thing is, you said you can get fentanyl strips at police departments. And I'm not going to say this, but if I was a user, and I'm going to say I'm going to call the police so that I can.
Right, correct. They probably wouldn't, but here's the part that those departments that are choosing to carry fentanyl strips are somebody who's probably very involved in our DART program, has a good harm reduction piece, and they still know, bottom line, they know that individual is still using.
Right.
So why not give them all the tools?
And then the fear of alerting someone that I'm using. I mean, so there's that.
Yep. Yep.
But the other thing is, and I would think if I'm a family member and if I suspect a friend, a child, or somebody is using, and I'm knowing this, I might go to the police department myself and say, listen, I have a family member, and on behalf of them, get the test strips. And they say, listen, use these if you're using, and at least that takes the person out of the.
And I do know some acquaintances that have done that.
Okay.
So yes.
So at least that's an option for someone
Correct.
to say, hey, I'm nervous about this.
Yep.
So too, they can get Narcan as well as fentanyl strips.
Yep.
And this may not be the user who's getting those things directly, because it alerts people that they're using.
Correct.
But if somebody is aware of it, a friend, a family member, it might behoove them to get that.
Correct.
Yeah. Without the, consequence.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, with our DART program,
Yeah.
if you come into a police department that is a DART program and you're saying that I need help with my substance use, it is about the substance use. It's not about the legal piece to it.
It's really.
And that is what the police officers in our DART program do.
And they will recognize where to at least redirect people to treatment rather than arresting them. Right?
Yep.
That's the whole.
Yeah, we have a program that just Ware is one of our in Hampshire County. Ware is one of our police departments that's very active in DART, and their DART officers just started offering drop-in hours in Ware on Wednesday nights, and it's just a place for you to go and get resources, get Narcan, and what a change. I mean, that is not typical of a police department, but that is something that they're offering the community in Ware right now, and they just started.
And I think years ago, at least in my opinion, years ago, when I'd see the needle resources and all these, I would think that's just crazy. Why would anybody enable that kind of use? But when you look at what's changed, the alternative, and it becomes a program that you say, you know what, this actually might work better.
Well, and to me, it's not enabling.
Right.
So the bottom line is harm reduction is not enabling.
It's perceived as enabling sometimes.
It is,
yeah.
and that's the stigma piece that we need to change.
Right.
We are not enabling somebody, but we're providing them a healthy resource to do what they're doing. And also, we do know that people who are involved in harm reduction, either through Tapestry or DART, it's about building a relationship and a trust. So a lot of those incidences that somebody who's currently choosing not to stop, we're building a trust and a relationship with that person so that they can maybe start think about how they could change their choices in their life. And I think that that's the key in harm reduction, and it does happen.
Yeah, and there's so many programs, and we've had many people on this program, Learn to Cope, with people at Mira Vista, Recovery Connection, several of them who are doing wonderful work. But it can be confusing to someone to say, well, my goodness, who do I call first? Do I need to call Mira? Do I call Recovery Connection? Do I call DART? But DART could be considered a go-to, a first option, because then you can at least direct people in the right place.
Right, and we have all of those connections, so that it is exactly that connection, so that you're not on the phone calling Mira Vista. Is this what I really need? Do I really need to go to detox or want to go to detox?
How do I know what I need?
Yes. Do I really want inpatient, which can be 30, 60, 90 days, sometimes longer? Is that the route that I want to go? So to have a recovery coach to talk that through with is so helpful, because there's so many pathways. I mean, they could end up just doing a recovery coach and going to recovery centers and receiving AA and NA and all of those through supports through peer recovery centers.
Yep, and I think that's not just for the person who is using, but for family members. And I think that's really important too, because if, again, I go back to it all the time, as parents, friends, my goodness, my friend, child, brother, sister is using, and I don't know what to do.
Right.
As a loved one who says, I got to find out what to do, they could call DART and then find out information and at least. And then the other aspect of this, which I wanted to ask you about, is when families are concerned and they may want to conduct an intervention. We did this years ago with a family member, and remember how difficult it was. And a lot of us in the family didn't know what to do, and we're all offering our opinions, and uneducated opinions. And but do you have any guidance on how a family might conduct an intervention, or at least call DART to say?
So to me, if a family member is at that point, I'm going to tell them to call Learn to Cope.
Okay.
Because there's such support and resources at Learn to Cope, for them to actually determine, is an intervention really the best choice, or what are my options? Is it just intervention? And I mean, let's be realistic. Is this person possibly a candidate to have a Section 35, which is a legal consequence that can happen, and then that they're mandated to go into a substance use recovery program under the Section 35. But again, you need an agency or a group to really talk to you about all of those different options. There's not just one, there are multiple.
Right.
And could your loved one just, again, do a pathway through peer support, or go to a recovery center and do their pathways with a recovery coach there? Is there imminent danger that the person is at risk to themselves? That's where you start to talk about a Section 35. So I think, to me, and that's the avenue that I took early on when Adam began his substance use, is that Learn to Cope on a weekly basis. And currently you can do it by Zoom or by going to the center. They talk about all of those options. And the other key piece is that you are meeting with other families that are parents that are going through the same thing, and there's no judgment, but they have advice of what their experiences were. And so that support is key. Whereas if you're a person who, you're a family and you're asking other family members for, they don't, let's be honest.
But also, too, and then with all that, if you're going, and of course, people are apprehensive, they're nervous, and when they find other families, it's almost a relief. It's almost like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone.
Correct.
And I think that's huge.
That is huge. And, and the same thing, I belong to a number of grief support groups now that Adam has passed. And again, same thing, no judgment. And it's great to realize as you're grieving, and there's no point A to point B to C, it's all over the place when you're grieving, when you've lost a child, to then realize again, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And I can express my feelings or my thoughts and not be judged by somebody who's never been through that experience.
Yes, and it's
key.
worth mentioning Learn to Cope's website, which is learn2cope.org.
Correct.
Learn2cope.org, yeah.
And then a grief site would be SADOD, SADOD, and I think it's .org. Actually, we can kind of Google that. And that's another great...
See if you can multitask.
I actually can. So again, just a great resource also for families and friends, not just, in siblings. You got to, look at the whole picture. It is SADOD.org is their website. And they have, they list all agencies in Massachusetts.
Okay.
But you can, when you go in to search, you can say that you're looking for Western Mass or even, like Key Point to Springfield, and they'll say 10 miles. And then they also offer a lot of online services.
See, that's great with other organizations to know that DART is working with. And so DART, by the way, is run by an advisory board, right?
It is.
You are a DART coordinator, and this DART advisory board consists of a group of people who've lived the experience, and it's a combination of people in different areas of the addiction field. I mean, in all different areas. So it's from experience.
And community members and community businesses.
And you've certainly made a lot of progress. You've grown a lot and is still growing.
We are.
Because you're so effective. And that's great.
Yeah.
So we'll mention the website again. It's dartma.org. And do you remember the phone number from a few minutes ago that you mentioned?
588-2335.
588-2335. 413?
413, sorry.
413 588-2335.
And that's a call or text number.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because I think that could be the first call. And then from there, find out what opportunities, possibilities, what should be done next. Because I think, again, a lot of people don't know.
Right.
And this could be the first step towards all kinds of changes.
Change.
First step towards help, towards recovery. All right. Well, Kathi, thanks. You've provided a lot of great information. I learned a lot. And the DART program is certainly, I think we'll love to have you back and talk about this, and I'll be seeing you regularly, I think.
That'd be great.
All right. Well,
wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Well, sure.
Thanks. It was great to talk about DART.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody else for listening. I'm glad to have you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.